And if you've registered as an organization, maybe there's one or two or more people who are using one device, please register your device in the name of the organization. I hope that is clear, and that will enable Natalie and Valerie to place you into the correct group. And for you to do the changes on your device, I think you can go on you can click on participants, then you click on more, then next to your name, you can select the rename button and you write the name accordingly. Hope that is clear. Our first presentation this morning is from Berni Dymet, all the way from Australia. Good afternoon. I think right now for him it's about 5:10 in the afternoon. A man who needs not much introduction to many ACM members present here today, for he is a friend of ACM in many ways and for many, many years. He will be talking to us today about the 5 ways to let godly excellence permeate in your organization. That's exactly what we need in these days as we are standing firmly on the ground. Allow me to introduce Berni to you, and then he will kick off with his presentation today. Berni, after graduating from the Royal Military College as an officer in the Australian Army, Berni ran an international IT consulting firm with his 2 business partners. Now he is blessed to be able to share the good news of Jesus through many radio programs as the CEO and the Bible teacher of the Australian-based global ministry called Christianity Works. Each and every week, literally millions of people listen in to those messages through over 1,000 radio stations in 160 countries around the world. Christianity Works is not just a ministry, but is a movement, a bunch of friends who believe that by telling people about Jesus and by sharing the good news of Jesus with millions of people around the world in a way that speaks into the realities of life, in a way that helps people discover how it is that Christianity actually works in their life, and to see how God can change their lives. Join me this morning as we welcome Berni Dymet, and thank you so much, Berni, for joining us. Good morning, and over to you. God bless you.
Good morning, Sifo, and thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be able to be at the ACM conference, I guess without flying 14.5 hours. That being said, with all the familiar names that I see on the screen, and I just wish I could be there and we could fellowship together. Of course, in these days, it's not possible. In these days, we're living in difficult times, and I've been tracking things closely in South Africa. Of course, here in Australia, we have it so much better from a pandemic perspective. A big headline yesterday here in New South Wales, we have 1 case in New South Wales and a 2nd case was discovered. So we truly are blessed, but I know it's quite a different story in South Africa. So just know that we're standing with you and we're praying with you that the work that you do in Christian media is going to have a mighty impact. And standing firm in these difficult times is such an important thing, because we have the message of hope in Christ and Christ alone. Sippo, you actually quoted my favorite New Testament verse, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, for we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus to do the good works that he prepared beforehand for us to walk into. God has prepared good works for you in your ministry, in your media ministry, to touch many, many lives. And you know, excellence is such an important part of that. I'm going to start with a presentation now. I started off calling this 5 ways to let excellence permeate your organization. But we're not just talking about excellence. We're not talking about worldly success. In fact, the Bible knows very little of worldly success. We're actually talking about godly excellence, kingdom success, success that happens in love and humility, not in the world's ways. And this is the time where I believe we as Christians, as Christian media professionals, need to stand up and show the world that we are different, show the world that the hope that we profess in Jesus Christ is real through the amazing things that God enables us to do. Now, let me just, here we go. Excellence is something that's very dear to my heart, and the birthplace of excellence in my life began in my childhood. The high school that I went to, Wollongong High School, which is about 80 kilometres south of Sydney here in Australia, was founded in 1914, so the beginning of World War I, which is just a little bit before my time. But the logo that I've put up there has our school motto, Age Quod Agis, which means whatever you do, do it well. It was a selective high school. You had to be academically gifted to be able to go there. So there were a lot of really smart kids at this particular high school. And they really helped us to live out this motto of whatever we set our hand to, we should do it extremely well. Now, I strove very hard. I was blessed. I'm short, I'm dumpy, I'm grey-haired, I'm myopic, and I also happen to have an high IQ, right? That's just the way it was dished out when God was dishing things out. And I was really blessed to go to this school because they really inculcated this idea of excellence in everything that we do. So right from the beginning, it was part of my DNA. Now, see if I mentioned earlier that I graduated from the Royal Military College, Duntroon. That's young Berni accepting his commission from the Governor-General of Australia at the time, Sir Zelman Cowan. And at the Royal Military College, in my class, 161 started, and 4 years later, just 62 graduated. So it was a pretty tough course, a university degree course, plus, of course, all the military training. And there I am, all spangled up and all dressed up. And we used to spend hours spit polishing our boots. That's a thing. You know, the boots were spit polished so that when we went on parade, we practiced hours for graduation parades. I remember when Queen Elizabeth came and we practiced day after day after day. And man, when we were on that parade ground, we did drill that was just brilliant. I remember Her Majesty saying that she felt that the Corps of Staff Cadets, which were the cadets there, were every bit as good as her Grenadier Guards at Buckingham Palace. Man, the esprit de corps, that all that attention to detail, all that hard work, all that excellence built was really quite amazing. You know, when we were young, I was 18, 19, 20 when I was at Duntroon. It didn't all make sense. Why would you spend hours spit polishing your boots? Why would you spend all this time doing all this hard stuff and having room inspections and having hospital corners on your bed? It was all about excellence. They were training young men to go to war. Fortunately, I never did. But all that hard work and excellence built something in that team that was really quite incredible. So that's kind of what it was for me. Now, I share all of that to make the point that excellence is being bred into my DNA. And by the way, my parents emigrated from Europe after World War II, and they wanted much better for their children than what they had. So they drove us very hard too. But my warning is, before we start talking about excellence per se, is that there is a very dark and nasty underbelly to excellence. And it's an underbelly that as I was striving for worldly success as a young man, that I fell into. You see, perfectionism is the nasty underbelly of excellence. It is brilliant that we should seek to be excellent. That when we get this nasty spirit of perfectionism about us, that is just not a good thing. And perfectionism, by the way, my favorite saying used to be, it's so hard to soar like an eagle when you're surrounded by turkeys. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that that's not going to build a very good team. And so in my younger years, that drive for excellence and success actually ended up dividing teams. And we're going to talk about that a bit today, because I see that a lot in Christian ministries, and in particular in the medium ministries that I travel around and visit. Romans chapter 15, verse 1 and 2. We who are strong ought to put up with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Each of us must please our neighbor for the good purpose of building up the neighbor. Man, I'm picturing some Christian media ministries at the moment. I just was visiting one just the other day, interstate, but also in South Africa. And I think if we could live out those two verses in our ministries, a lot of the conflict that we see, a lot of the division that we see, which tears the organization down, which is the foothold for the enemy, a lot of that stuff would simply disappear. When I speak about excellence today, I'm talking about excellence in love. I'm talking about being a kingdom builder, not an empire builder. Don't be like me. Okay, excellence is great. And in a success-oriented world, hey, let's be excellent. Let's succeed. But is it biblical? Do you find discussion about excellence in the Bible? Well, actually you do. Right at the beginning in Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, when God had finished, he said, and God saw that everything he had made, and behold, it was very good. It wasn't just good, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. God didn't do any shoddy work. I imagine Jesus the carpenter never produced shoddy woodwork out of his carpenter shop in Nazareth. God is a holy God. God is a God of excellence. Genesis chapter 39, verses 2 and 3. We all know the story of Joseph and all the terrible things that he went through. By the time he got into Potiphar's house, the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. Joseph didn't end up being in charge of Potiphar's house by being lazy and by cutting corners. He did it by using his gifts in excellence. Daniel chapter 6, verse 3. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other presidents and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. I wonder, when you look in the mirror, when I look in the mirror, whether we can say to ourselves, is there an excellent spirit? Is there a spirit of godly excellence upon us? Colossians chapter 3, verse 23. Whatever your task, put yourselves into it as done for the Lord, and not for your masters, since you know that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You serve the Lord Christ. Brothers and sisters, in our respective media ministries, we serve our Lord Jesus Christ. We have the best message in all of history, the message of salvation in Christ and Christ alone. How can we not approach that with a spirit of excellence? All right, the 5 things that I'd like to talk about. We're going to start off with the first one. Hey, listen, there are many more things we could talk about in terms of having excellence permeate our organizations. I'm just not talking about you being excellent personally. I'm not just talking about 1 or 2 people being excellent in your organization. We are talking here about the whole organization working in a spirit of excellence. And my first point, number 1 in the list of 5, is leading from the front. It's one of the things they taught us in the military. If you want to lead men into battle where bombs are going off, shells are going off, planes are dropping bombs, bullets are flying, man, those people had better trust you. You had better be the sort of person that leads by example, that leads from the front. A question we would often ask ourselves was, would you follow this officer into battle? And you know, when you focus your mind on going into battle and potentially laying down your life, you can pretty quickly decide whether this is someone that you would follow or not. Are you someone who leads from the front? Let me ask you just a few questions about your personal habits at work, because the people that you work with, the people, if you're a leader, that you manage and lead, they're looking at you. They are watching you personally. What do they see? Let me ask you some questions. When do you get to work? Are you someone who sort of floats in and out? I know most of us are working from home at the moment. But do people know that you're a hard worker? Or are you absent and unavailable, and you drift in and out? You're here sometimes, you're not there otherwise. Elvis has left the building. That's not leading from the front. Are you someone who tidies up the office? Are you someone who shows people that you will do whatever needs to be done? Do you notice the mess and pick it up and move it? Do you pay attention to the detail? Do you notice when things aren't quite right and go about helping people to set them right? Do you have an eye for the detail? Do you model excellence? When people in your organization think about you, do they think excellence? I have a boss who just models excellence, and not only does he or she model it, he or she expects it of others. We can't expect it of them if we don't demonstrate it to them genuinely and consistently by leading from the front. That means getting down and dirty. That means getting involved. That means getting your hands dirty. Do we want to micromanage people? I don't think anyone wants to micromanage, and nobody wants to be micromanaged. But man, when they see the boss being prepared to empty the bins, when they see the boss being prepared to stay late to fix something until it's done, when they see you getting down and dirty in the ministry because that's what's needed, those people are going to catch your spirit of excellence. Excellence is not taught, it's caught. Excellence is inspired in other people because it beats in your heart, because it flows through your veins, because you believe that you're doing God's work, because you know that you're sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. Does that mean you can do everything? No, I have about 87 unread emails in my inbox at the moment because I've been traveling and I just can't get to them all. Doesn't mean you have to work 24 hours a day. What it does mean is you need to model excellence. I need to model excellence amongst the people who I am privileged to work with in the ministry of Christianity Works. I want to give you an example. We're in the middle of an appeal at the moment. On the 1st of May, we start our end of financial year appeal for Australia. End of financial year is June the 30th. And so each appeal these days, we never used to be able to do this. I think excellence is about incrementally improving. On the banner of our website, at the top of our website, is the appeal banner, which has been designed by the graphic artist. 4 o'clock this morning, I was looking at this banner and there was actually a donate button over on the right-hand side about where that man's t-shirt is, but there's already a donate button up high. So I emailed our graphic artist, and by 11 o'clock, we got rid of the donate button and we put a find out more button on the left-hand side so that it just works better. It's those little things that make a difference. It's the spirit of excellence. And by the way, if you click on that banner and if you go to christianityworks.co.za, you will see that banner. We have multiple websites in multiple countries with different currencies. You will see this banner. If you click on the banner, you will end up at the donation page. Would you please notice that that banner image appears on the donation page? And during the course of the 2-month campaign, it's a long campaign because we don't have a radio station where we can do a radiothon. During the course of the campaign, the copy that sits below that image is going to progressively change to match the fundraising letters and emails that we send out to the people who support the ministry. And by the way, of the 68,000 people who get the fresh daily devotional by email every day, you will notice, if you happen to subscribe to it, that this morning that same appeal image was at the bottom of the fresh devotional. I would love to tell you that all of this happens because I'm a really clever guy, but I'm not. My job in this is to keep asking the question, how can we make it better? How can we do it better? How can we reach our constituency better? How can we explain the need of the appeal better? And then all these smart young people come along and they do stuff that I just can't imagine. By the way, we had a donor 2 weeks ask us whether we take cryptocurrency donations because he's been playing the crypto market and he's done very, very well, and he wants to give some money to the ministry in Bitcoin. So by the middle of next week, we will be accepting 26 cryptocurrencies by way of donations. And no, not playing the risky crypto market, simply taking the cryptocurrency donations and converting them immediately into US dollars or Australian dollars. Why? Because excellence never stands still, because excellence is always innovating. And we have a great guy who's handling that for us, and a team in the US who's building that for us. That's excellence, it's innovation. Excellence begets excellence. So I'm passionate about excellence, but I'm surrounded by people who are so stunningly excellent. There's a crowd who are our fundraising consultants. They're called Dunham and Company. They're based in the US. They've been working with us since 2007. Those people are mind-blowingly amazing. They come up with things, with ideas. They were the ones that got the banner happening on the homepage, the image happening on the donation page, the banner happening on the bottom of the Fresh Daily devotional email. They're the ones that drive all this stuff, that continue to help us to innovate. They inspire me. I'm the CEO of the ministry. These people inspire me. Right on this conference is Brenda Ubuntu in Rwanda, who goes and helps Christian radio stations across Africa with their fundraising. That woman, that young woman, inspires me through her excellence. Excellence begets excellence. And the flip side of that is that mediocrity begets mediocrity. What's the spirit in your organization? What's pumping through your heart? A passion, a desire to do the ministry's very best for the glory of our King? Or a sense of boredom and complacency and doing the same thing over and over again? I was visiting a radio station here in Australia in the last few weeks in a different state to where I live. And they have one of the strongest transmitters, 56 kilowatt transmitter, that reaches a massive audience. And I look at their digital, and I look at their online, and I look at their promotions, and it stood still in time. People, that's not good enough. We need to be driving forward and innovating in a spirit of excellence. What is it that's beating through your heart at the moment? Nothing ignites excellence like servant leadership, like the boss who's prepared to take the garbage out, like the person who's prepared to do the stuff that no one else sees. Your team will see, and your team will catch excellence from your servanthood. Okay, the second thing is to nurture through failure. You know that old bumper sticker, failure happens? Failure absolutely happens. I think we as the church are one of the few organisations that bayonets our own wounded. We don't handle failure all that well. I've seen so much conflict in Christian ministries because they don't understand how to handle failure effectively. Is there anybody here who has never failed at anything in life or in ministry? Of course not. We all fail at stuff. And yet, you and I, we so easily get angry with people who make a mistake. We so easily get angry with people who fail. When was the last time you got cranky, you gave someone the look, or you pushed them away because they made a mistake? Come on, we all tend to do it. The reality is that every venture, whether it be a project, whether it be a ministry, whether it be a personal journey, looks like this picture. Yeah, you want it to go upwards, and we'd like it to go upwards in a straight line without any friction, but it just doesn't work that way. Things happen that we don't expect. COVID happens. People resign. Stuff happens. People make mistakes. How does your organization handle failure? I believe that we as Christians should be leveraging failure into excellence. What do I mean by that? I expect people to fail. I expect me to fail, and I expect the people in our team to fail, and I expect some of our ministry partners to fail from time to time. We all fail. That's what happens. I won't accept laziness. I won't accept dishonesty. I won't accept a bad attitude. But a genuine, honest failure is exactly that. And we've talked about this. We have 13 staff around the world, and every now and then we catch up on Zoom for a global hookup. And back in the middle of last year, I just shared with all of the people in our Christianity Works team that you are allowed to fail. And if you failed genuinely, you tried something and it just didn't work out, and maybe you made a mistake, there is no finger pointing. We are not a blame-oriented organisation. Man, you would not believe the amount of finger pointing that goes on. I'm specifically talking about Christian media ministries now that destroys ministries. Be there to catch them when they fall. 2 cords is better than 1. 3 is better than 1. That's what the Bible says in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. How come we can't live that out? How come we can't compensate for other people's weaknesses and errors? Forgive them as quickly as you can. Ask ourselves, what did we learn? And would you, for Pete's sake, just move on and work together rather than being pulled apart? Oh, and by the way, when you make a mistake, when I make a mistake, we need to own our failures publicly. Amen. We can leverage failure into excellence. And I'll tell you why. Because failing hurts as much now as adults as it did when we were kids in the schoolyard. Yeah. You remember being ostracized in the schoolyard. You remember someone bullying. You remember that, how much that hurt. And we know it's the same as adults. You go to work, you try and do your best, you make a mistake, and someone rips your head off in a Christian organization. Imagine how much people would be prepared to give if they knew that they were loved and supported in their ministry, even when they make a mistake. Come on, people, this is big stuff. This is important stuff. How we handle failure has everything to do with excellence in our organization. People need to know that they're loved. And when they're loved and supported, they will give you the shirt off their back. Third point, square pegs go in square holes and round pegs go in round holes. Would you please listen to that again? Square pegs go in square holes and round pegs go in round holes. You know that friction happens, right? It's like that bumper sticker, friction happens. And one of the most common reasons for friction is that we don't understand that the next person's different. Romans chapter 12, verses 4 to 8 talks about the motivational giftings. Those who are called to lead should lead. Those who are called to give should give. Those who are called to teach should teach. If your gift is prophecy, prophesy. If your gift is giving, give in generosity. And each of those people have different strengths and weaknesses. That's what the Bible teaches. The Bible says we are one body with many parts. And if you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 12, I think it is, it talks about how the eye says, well, I'm not part of the body because I'm not an ear, and the ear points at the eye and the foot point. Why do we do that? Why do we want people to be the same as us? You know what I love? I love being surrounded by people who are smarter than me in different ways. And that's what our ministry looks like. I'm really blessed to be part of this amazing team, none of whom are perfect, as I am not perfect, but bring all these amazing different skills and perspectives to the table, even though sometimes the differences can drive you just a little bit nutty. Let me ask you a question. Would you put this man in to open the batting in a T20 match? He's possibly one of the greatest fast bowlers who's ever taken to the field, Dale Steyn, with a ball in his hand. You know what he averages in a T20 match with a bat? 3.5 runs is his average batting performance. You wouldn't put him to open the batting any sooner than you would flap your wings and fly to the moon. But you would die to have him as a bowler. Now, if cricket teams can figure out that bowlers bowl balls and batsmen bat, why can't we figure that out? Why can't we play to one another's strengths and let excellence grow because we have gift-oriented ministry happening? So put the right people on the bus, get them on the bus, and then figure out what to do with them. That comes from Good to Great by Jim Collins. If you haven't read that book, you should read that book. The mistake that a lot of organizations make is they go, I need one of these. I need a person that does this. So I'm going to write the job description. I'm going to create the strategy. Then I'm going to go out and hire the person. And Collins says, no, what you need to do is just go and find the best people. Get them on the bus and then figure out what to do with them. Let them be part of figuring out the direction. This guy that's standing next to me in this photo is called Gregory Bacon. He used to work with Back to the Bible in the US, and we were part of bringing him out to Australia 10 or 11 years ago. It was too early in our ministry and we couldn't keep him because we just didn't have the money. So he's been off doing other things. He's rejoined our team now and he works in a major donor development role. A couple of weeks ago, he and I were down in Melbourne and we were visiting a bunch of major donors, people who give extremely generously. And I honestly, because I'm not pastorally gifted, right? That's why God's put me in a TV studio and a radio studio. It's not that I don't love people. I'm just not pastorally gifted. Anybody who knows me knows that. Gregory is. He has a gentleness and a warmth and an ability to talk to people. I'm telling you, I felt like a blunt instrument sitting next to this guy when we were talking to those major donors. What a privilege to have someone on the team who can do that and help grow the income of the ministry in a way that I never could. I love the fact that we have complementary skills. So many good and godly Christians are in open conflict in their ministries. I could name, and I won't, I could name at least half a dozen Christian media ministries, some of whom you would know, where people whom I love and respect are in incredible conflict with one another. That's a terrible indictment, people. That shouldn't be happening because we need to accept that we're all different and make up for one another's weaknesses. All right, point number 4, vox populi. What does vox populi mean? It's a Latin phrase that means the voice of the people. Traditionally in organizations, we're very hierarchical. What the boss says goes. I do a lot of work in India. We have a team in India. Any of you who have an Indian background will know that culturally, Indians are very hierarchical in their thinking. And let me put it really as bluntly as this: you never tell the white guy that he's wrong. It's just the way it works in India. Now, Elia Komu, who's our India director, and also he does all the financial management for the ministry globally. He and I have been working together for 14 years. Our media director there, Isaac Krishna, the same thing. And I would often say to them, so what do you guys think about what I've suggested? And there'd be a quiet shuffling of the feet. And I said, listen to me. If I'm being an idiot, I want to know before we spend any money. Anyway, a couple of years ago, Isaac, who's been with us now for 10 years, he said to me, finally, I figured it out. He said, I really like doing business this way because we know what you think and you know what I think. It's so often the people at the top of the chain who get heard and the little ones down the bottom never get listened to. Case in point, this is Charmaine Chong. She's our head of operations. She joined our ministry, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. Quiet little thing, 5 hours a day, part-time, just working away, doing data entry. And you know what? I never really paid much attention to it because she was quiet. And after a while, I'm just working crazy hours and I really needed someone to head up our operations, you know, distributing programs, different versions, formats, content all over the world to different stations, radio, television, digital channels is a big job. And I thought, I can't afford an operations manager. I can't afford to go out there. And one night in the middle of the night, I woke up and I thought, here is this young woman, trained, a degreed accountant, Singaporean. Anyone know any Singaporeans? They are so organized and they are so meticulous. They are the Germans of the Orient. And so I went to her and said, Charmaine, would you be our head of operations? We couldn't live without her. This woman is my right arm in the ministry, who just makes the whole thing run. Some of you have dealt with her. She's an amazing woman, humble, quiet, brilliant. What's the matter with us that we don't notice the so-called little people in our ministries? They have some of the best ideas. And man, when you're sitting around having an operations meeting and you say, what's going on in your world? What's going on in your world? And someone comes up with this brilliant idea that you would never have thought of in a million years, and you implement that brilliant idea, it's like putting a rocket, strapping a rocket to their back. They are so excited that they got listened to and they're part of it. We have a monthly meeting in our office of our whole massive team here in Australia, I think 6 people. And it's basically just going around saying, what's going on in your neck of the woods and what ideas, what could we do better? And it's through that constant listening and innovation that excellence just ends up happening. Do the people in your organization, have you given them time and space to speak? Have you taken the time to listen to what they think, to see things through their eyes, to hear from them, to empower them to share their ideas? Not every idea is going to go forward, but man, they have some great ideas. This is how excellence happens. Finally, I'm going to talk about transparency and accountability. It sounds really boring, but I'm telling you that unless you have transparency and accountability in your organization, you're not going to have excellence. Because you know what? I've worked in over 250 organizations as a consultant on 4 continents. And I can tell you that bad news almost never travels uphill. In fact, this image is probably one of the best images that describes how things work in most organizations. Top down, hierarchical, no one ever listens to the people at the bottom of the food chain. I think as a Christian, you have to be asleep not to have heard of the distressing developments in RZIM with Ravi Zacharias. And I'm not picking on RZIM, but isn't this ingrained moral failure over so many years an absolute tragedy for such an amazing man with an amazing ministry and this organization that's been gutted because nobody held him to account? This was going on. The sexual abuse and harassment of women was going on by the leader of the ministry, the guy that was on television, the guy that was up front, and nobody held him to account. None of us are above it. Compare that to the exemplary moral behavior of this man, Billy Graham. Never a sniff of impropriety. So in our ministry, we've actually implemented a couple of things to help bad news to travel uphill. Think about our ministry. It is completely vulnerable to my personal moral behavior. And as the CEO, I must be held to account in our organization. So we've implemented some genuine transparency measures, which honestly, I've been the one driving with our board. Here's some of the things we've done. Our financial controller Elliot Komu in India has a letter from the chairman of our board that charges him with the responsibility of directly going to the chairman around me and above my head if there is any financial impropriety in the ministry. It is part of his job description and a requirement on him. We have a whistleblower policy. I'm not sure if whistleblowing translates into South African culture, but you know the concept of a football game, there's a foul, the umpire, the referee blows the whistle, it stops and they give a penalty or whatever they do. By law in Australia, we must have a whistleblower policy. We have a 3-page whistleblower policy which tells people that if there is anything that's going wrong, it is incumbent upon them to raise it with their supervisor, to take it to the CEO, to take it, if needs be, directly to the board, and the chairman has an email address that they all know. And if we don't collectively do anything, to then, if the law has been broken, go directly to the police. And if you do this, the promise in our whistleblower policy is that you will not be punished. If it's malicious or dishonest, sure. But other than that, you will not suffer any retribution. If you want to look at that whistleblower policy, christianityworks.com/whistleblower. And this morning at 4 o'clock this morning, I was writing our new code of conduct, which our board discussed at our last board meeting, and we decided that we have to have a living, breathing code of conduct, which says that Brenda and I can't travel together unless there's a third party. Members of the opposite sex do not travel together. When Joseph Kevy and I and Brenda were in Kenya, in Nairobi at a conference, Joseph and I stayed in one hotel, Brenda stayed in another hotel. People, none of us is beyond temptation. None of us. And we need to set up stuff that stops this sort of bad behavior from happening. Finally, genuine accountability of the board. We have strong board members. I'm a strong leader, so I need strong board members who ask me hard questions. They approve our strategy. They approve our budget. They get a monthly financial dashboard so that they know exactly what's happening with the finances. We do warts and all reporting at board level so that they know the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the benefit of that for me as the CEO is that it makes me have my finger on the pulse. It's a discipline for me to know what's going on in all the parts of our ministry. Deliberate steps for transparency and accountability. So the 5 elements that we talked about again. Lead from the front. Nurture your people and your team through failure. Put square pegs in square holes, round pegs in round holes. Listen to the people, their ideas, the problems they see, their suggestions. And finally, make sure that you have genuine transparency and accountability in your ministry organisation. Well, I think, Sifo, it's time for a bit of Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Berni, for such an insightful presentation. And I trust and believe that everyone who was following this is excited as I am. So we really appreciate your time. Colleagues, it's time for Q&A. If you have some questions, please feel free to drop them on our chat box and I will pose them to Berni. But Berni, as we probably waiting for some questions from our colleagues, you know, research shows that operational excellence is another aspect that creates viable and sustainable foundation for the organization to be successful in one way or another. And I'm asking myself, how do you assess that operational excellence within the organization? I heard you earlier say when we talk about excellence, we're not just talking about individual excellence, but organizational excellence. Now, I just want to ask, how do you assess that? How do you evaluate that excellence in a long period of time in an organization?
Yeah, we're constantly looking at our systems and our outputs, right? Radio stations, television stations, magazines, we all have different kinds of ministries and different kinds of outputs. In our case, we produce content that is translated into 10 or 11 different languages and distributed around the world. And that's a complex business with different translations and versions and all that sort of stuff. So we are constantly systematizing our creativity. One of the hardest things to do for creatives is to be systems oriented, but I'm a systems guy from way back in IT. So that's the first thing. We systematize our creativity so that it runs like a well-oiled machine. And we have key performance indicators in place which help us measure the operational excellence. For instance, I know the ratio of donors who have lapsed against new donors and lapsed donors that we have reactivated. We measure that, right? We know that. We assess that. It's going up, it's going down. We have a target for how many active donors we want to have by a certain date. So we're measuring what's happening against the target. It's not working. What do we have to change? If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. That's the bottom line. When it comes to operational excellence, you need to be able to measure it in order to improve it. A lot of people don't like being measured. A lot of people say, I'm creative. That's great. But we still need to know, are we doing what we expected to do? Or are we not doing what we expected to do? You can't measure it. You don't know if it's working. You can't improve it.
Thank you. And another thing, you know, we're living right now in the time of COVID, as we all aware, which has changed the manner that we do things. Has, in your view, this COVID had some obstacle in achieving process excellence within organization? Has this affected the way organizations operate and the excellence that we see? In South Africa, I know in Australia, you're not as locked down as we probably are in most parts of the world. But here we find ourselves, people working virtually now, working from home, and so on. Has that, in a way, would you think this COVID is kind of like affecting the excellence of organizations, or is it bringing some improvement in that aspect?
I guess it depends on whether you had a culture of excellence to start with or not. Some people work effectively remotely. Others, the really good, the people persons, they struggle being on their own, right? And we understand that. But I just don't think that it's working remotely or working together that is the issue here. Look at the technology. We can have a conference now where I'm sitting in Australia and we can do stuff. Now, it kind of helps that as I look at a lot of the names on my screen, I kind of know the people. So that it gives me a bit of a license to relate to people. We as an organization have been working remotely. I mean, Brenda sits in Kigali, Joseph sits in Accra in Ghana, our VP International Ministries sits in Virginia in the US. We've been doing this for years and years and years and years. And I just don't think at the office or remotely is the issue. The question is the leadership driven to excellence? Does the leadership inspire excellence? Does the leadership nurture its people and build the systems to do excellence well?
I've got one or two questions here from our chat box. One says from Tulani Mdleche that can you please speak more on the effects of pointing culture or attitude in management as opposed to problem-solving attitude in cases where there's been genuine failure?
Yeah, I think I've been part of blame-oriented cultures in the past, not for a long time. I haven't worked for anyone since 1989, right? So I had my own IT consulting firm and then moved into ministry. So I haven't been part of like a larger organization where I'm not the leader. But as a consultant, I often went into organizations that they immediately leapt to blame people. I was sitting having dinner the night before last in Melbourne with the head of the Australian outfit of a large global Christian content production organization. If I mentioned their name, you would know this organization immediately. And his board couldn't accept that he had skills in one area, but not in the other area. So there's friction and tension between the board and the CEO. Instead of the board saying, hey, he does content so blooming well, but he doesn't quite have the business and marketing skills. Why don't we find some people to come alongside to do the business and marketing stuff and let him go on and do the content thing? And I think it's a mindset and a mentality when we beat people up for not being able to do stuff. Man, if you made me the chaplain of an aged care facility, I would shoot myself, honestly. And the people would not feel particularly edified because I just can't do that, right? It's just not me. but tell me to speak for 40 minutes and I'll speak for 40 minutes, right? That's what I do. So people, if you're in leadership, could you please understand that all of your team members have strengths and they have weaknesses, and they're genuinely going to some days make mistakes. If you are there to pick them up, if you are there to put your arms around them, if you are there to love them and speak the truth in love, because it's not all lovey-dovey. Sometimes you have to counsel people because of poor performance. I've had to fire people in ministry, and that's a blooming awful thing to happen to do. But if they know that you love them and care for them, honestly, they are going to give you the shirts off their back.
Thank you. I've got two last questions to pose before maybe we close this session. I'll start with the first one from Skip. He says, is excellence not being perceived as perfectionism by the employees? Is excellence not perceived as perfectionism by the employees? Let me just ask both questions so that when you respond, you can respond to them. And the second question from Phil says, the need precedes the person versus choice of quality people to find the needs. I hope that makes sense. Isn't there some risk that even quality people brought on won't fit in the bill or the perceived holes in the organization?
Yeah, look, that's true. So the first question was, sorry, I got a short attention span.
Is excellence not being perceived as perfectionism by employees?
You know, we all want to work for an organization that is a vehicle for us to use our God-given gifts for the glory of God. That's what we want to do. And if you enable people to do that, if you give them a vehicle to use their gifts, if you inspire them, that's not perfectionism. Perfectionism is when you walk around with a big stick and you whack people over the head. Every time they make a mistake, you whack them over the head. That's perfectionism, and it's going to tear the organization apart. The second question about the match between the organization's needs and the people that you hire, sure. But look, I'm sorry to use Brenda again, but she's here and we can't see her, so we can't see her get embarrassed, right? I met her in Kigali late one night after I'd been teaching for 2 days and I was absolutely spent, and we went to her parents' house, and I just looked at this young woman and I thought, she has got the goods. And then I went away and figured out, what do we do with those goods? And God helped us to merge that, and now she does stuff that we never thought we'd be able to do as a ministry. Yes, there's a chicken and egg relationship, without a doubt. But man, if you find someone who's really, really good, grab them, because they're hard to find.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you so much, Berni. Really much appreciated. And thank you for your time. And thank you as well for giving such an excellent presentation. Colleagues, if we can all show our faces and just give Berni a big hand of applause and just say thank you to him as he's wrapped up. Thank you so much. Berni, thanks. Let's just all wave our hands and clap our hands and just say thank you to him.
It's so good to see so many familiar faces. Hello, Anine. Hello, Rickus. Oh, man, it's good to see you guys.
Yeah, I know when you're talking. I know when you're talking and everyone is close their videos, it's like you're talking to yourself. So I wanted them to show their faces so that you can see there's people who are listening to you. Once again, thanks, Berni. Much appreciated.
God bless you. Thanks, Sifo, and thanks, everybody. It's time for me to go and have some spaghetti bolognese.